Welcome, Legacy Warriors, to episode 7 of the Legacy Warrior podcast. I am here with my partner in crime, Miss Stephanie McKinley.
Hey, everybody.
All right. We're about to get into it today. This is about to be some fire episode. If you're driving, you might even want to pull over. It's going to be so good.
Yeah, you need a pen and paper on this one. You need to take some notes because this one right here is super, super important.
I hope that all of these can transform your life, but this one specifically is made to transform your life, and it is going to be straight out of the School of Hard Knocks and experiences that Stephanie and I have both had in our life journeys as parents, in our marriage, as individuals, as we get ready to talk about expectations and their impact on not only our own potential, but the relationships that we have for others. Steph, I know you were the one that came up with this idea for this episode specifically because of how you feel about expectations. And so I know you're excited about this.
Yes, super excited. To me, this is a huge part of, like he said, this affects not only ourselves, but really, really affects relationships. And I just think it's so crucial piece that we often doesn't get talked about enough, I think. So I'm really excited to dive into this episode and really get to tell you guys where we've learned from this in our relationship and really all our relationships. This affects every facet of your life, not just your spouse, not just, it's your children. It happens at work. It's in the school. It's everywhere. Every facet of your life, there's expectations, and we don't realize how much they affect us. Our society puts expectations on us. I mean, it's just around us all the time, and I think more than ever. And it's part of what's adding to the stress and anxiety that everyone's feeling is because we're feeling kind of crushed or overwhelmed by all these expectations. So I just really, really hope that you guys can take away some big pieces from this, some really, really good nuggets from this, because this will transform your life happiness. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing I want everyone to take away is that expectations really affect your happiness and others' happiness around you. So yeah,
it's like Steph said, expectations really do fill every facet of our lives, and it just crushes our personal potential. And look, guys, we're talking about this and we're so passionate about it because it has stopped us in our tracks in our life at times as we beat our head against this wall of expectations that was standing in front of us and wondered why we were getting dizzy and we kept falling down without trying to realize that we needed to really find a way around this. And we needed to change our mindset and be more mindful in how we approach certain situations in our life in order to remove expectations, not even limit expectations, not manage expectations, but truly remove expectations.
Yeah, or I would say temper your expectations. But
see,
honestly,
Steph and I think different about this one.
I do think you're going to be a lot happier if you pretty much remove them. Like you really have to not have expectations if you really want to be happy.
And this is cool because as Steph and I were talking about this specific podcast, her perspective is always a little different than mine in the feminine masculine view and the experiential view of what we went through in our own lives, but also like how she is more about limiting expectations and I'm more about just removing them altogether. Ultimately, it's all about building a happier, healthier you, because that's what we do here is help you maximize your potential and help you really change your legacy based upon the actions that you're taking today. And so, we need to just start off like, what is a damn expectation? You guys know every single podcast, same format. What are we talking about? Why are we talking about it? And the 4 keys to doing whatever we're talking about in an extraordinary way. And so what is an expectation? So we actually went to our friendly chat GPT today and just typed in, what is an expectation? And here's what came out.
And I have to tell you guys, the definition for an expectation was like a paragraph long because it's that complicated.
Right.
Yeah, it's really hard to define, actually.
I think ChatGPT was fitting to write a dissertation for us. You know what I'm saying? We're like, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, actually.
We didn't want the college outline. We're just looking like for a 1-2 sentence answer real quick, because we have our perspectives and we're going to talk about that. But we wanted to just see what is even the definition of an expectation. So here we go. An expectation is a belief or assumption about a future outcome or event. It can be based on past experiences, cultural or societal norms, personal desires or goals, or other factors. So we think that expectations are going to give us this control and predictability, but really they just throw us into internal chaos and angst. And there's two types of expectations that we'll touch on today within the story framework of what we're going to talk about. And that's expectations that you put on yourself. And this is huge for me. I've had to really grow through this because my expectations for me are extraordinarily high, which is in times of my life has been such an incredible strength.
Right. And this is where we kind of disagree, because I think some expectations, there's pros and cons to expectations. And some of the pros are that it does push you to reach goals. If you set higher expectations, you tend to reach higher. And that's where I think like that's part of what has made Walt really successful, is he does hold himself to really high expectations. And so he's really chasing these high expectations, and he attains a lot because he sets them high. But on the flip side of that, the con of that is that when we fall short of them, we feel like we've failed. And that's where we're talking about this chaos, this internal chaos then we have that we didn't meet it. And it leaves us, it affects our self-esteem and our confidence. And so that's the con of the expectation for yourself.
Right. And on the flip side of that, in your relationships, you will just hammer your relationships and destroy them having expectations on your partner. And we'll talk about it as we go along. It doesn't mean you don't have hopes. It doesn't mean you don't have desires. It doesn't mean that you don't have, you don't require certain ways that you're going to be treated in order for you to live at your best potential. All those things are still relevant, but it's the expectations. And we'll get in what that means to us individually here in just a second.
So I kind of laugh at this because like the ChatGPT example they gave for the expectation, like one of them was, it makes me think of that movie with Nicolas Cage where I can't remember the name of it, but it was like he got put into a new life.
Oh, Family Man. You're talking about that one with Tia Leone in it?
Yes.
Yeah. That was actually a pretty good movie.
And she has this expectation of what he's going to do.
I watched that either.
She has this expectation of what he's going to do for their anniversary, or for her for the anniversary. And she's thinking like, she's used to this. He does this grand gesture or whatever. And because he didn't actually, he got thrown into that or whatever, he didn't meet her expectation. And it didn't go well from there. So
he didn't meet her expectation, so she didn't meet his, if you know what I'm saying. Bada bang, hey.
And that's what really happens.
It really is, because I think that the expectations, and we're going to talk a lot about gratitude later, but the expectations don't allow you to be in gratitude with the amazing person, which may be you too, right? Like with the amazing person you are, but the amazing person that you're partnering with, or your kids, or whoever it is. You can't stay in gratitude in life if you're stuck in expectations, because people will never meet your expectations. It's just not realistic, because our expectations, what was the definition? It's the assumption. We know when you assume, right? I don't got to say what that means.
A belief or assumption
about a future outcome or event based upon your experiences, the things that you've been through, the relationships you've had, what people have or haven't done before. It has nothing to do with the other person. Your expectations are based upon your life experiences, not somebody else's.
Correct. I was going to say, huge takeaway right here. Write this down if you have to, is you can't expect someone else to react to something the same way you would. Or you're only setting yourself up to be hurt in that situation, because no one is ever going to look at something or do something the same way you would. Everyone's different. Everyone has had a different experience in their life. Just look at Walt and I, like we're we're literally polar opposites. He grew up in the Southwest. I grew up in the Northeast. He's a male. I'm a female. He's an extrovert. I'm an introvert. Like almost everything about
Opposites
how
attract.
we,
Let's go.
how we would approach something is totally
I'm super
different.
assertive. She's a little bit more passive, you know?
Yeah. And even like our upbringing, you know, like he had divorced parents. I had parents that stayed together. Like, so everything about our experiences was totally different. Now put these two people together and then they have expectations for each other. And what do you think is going to happen?
And expectations, like I said, they're always rooted in the wants and desires that you have. Like even my personal, even my professional stuff that I did, the goals that I set out to attain along the way, they were based upon my experiences and why I wanted to create opposite experiences in my adulthood professionally. I wanted the success. What I found though is my success was rooted in expectations. There were a certain way that I wanted everything to play out. And when I would actually attain some of these goals, and I believe goals are just a waypoint on the destination of life. You never will ever stop growing, stop maturing, stop reaching that next level unless you make a conscious choice to just stop trying. And so we're always evolving. So for me, and I'll give you an example. So the first few times I was promoted in corporate America, or even when I got my military officer program, so I was less than a 1% selection rate in the military for this officer program. Out of over 200 applicants, I was the only one to get it. I had been Sailor of the Year. Like I had done the work, right? I had done the work to get to this point, but I expected to get it because of that. And so when I was called into the admiral's office for them to tell me that I earned my way into this officer commissioning program, I wasn't even happy. I was relieved. And that sucks. It took me a long time to figure this out. I would get to my goal, but because one, I knew I would work hard enough to get there, so I expected to get there. I never slowed down to be present and enjoy the journey and the growth and the fun and the things that you really take away are never from the accomplishment. It's always from the journey. But if you're not,
you didn't really get to appreciate it because you were expecting to get it. And then if you didn't, you would have been like crushed with, you had this crushing defeat where, and like you said, when you did get it, it was more like relief than actually being happy about it.
Well, I did in corporate America, the last role I didn't get the promotion for. And I still to this day, I think I earned it and I deserved it. But I really did expect it in the moment too, because I had really done the work. It just didn't make sense. So when I didn't get it, it really was crushing. Now, thank God I had grown enough in my life to be able to move forward. But you were here. I had to lick my wounds for normally I lick my wounds for a couple hours, but it was like a week or two.
There were a couple of times and this is an example of expectations in the workplace. Like I know for a while, like in the Navy, a lot of people expect to make the next rank with, usually it's like based on a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's time, but sometimes it's other factors that you
can early promote also based upon how you do in evaluations and stuff. But ultimately the number one factor is just doing your time in rank, they call it.
So even in that situation, you're expecting this because you're like, okay, I did my time. Like I should be getting promoted. And then you don't, like, you're going to be really upset.
Right.
And the same thing, like you're trying to reach that next promotion at work and their boss tells you, okay, like he gives you certain things that he's like, once you attain these, you're going to get it. And then you don't, because there's all these other factors that nobody can control. Because like we saw with the company he was with, like if there's a change in the economy and they suddenly need to conserve money somehow, things change and then they can't promote people like they would have. Well,
they consolidated roles in that instance. When that happened, they took two VP roles and made them one, which limited the opportunity and potential to promote. And what did I always say in corporate America? What do I say now? Like control the controllables. But ultimately I was trying to control everything because I had expectations that I can do it both internally and externally. And the reality was the only thing I could really control was myself.
Exactly.
My level of effort, my attitude, the way I responded versus reacted when I was triggered, because we all get triggered. Those are the only things that I can control. And so it's like setting boundaries.
That's what we have to realize with these expectations too, is we can't control anybody. We can't control anything except our own reactions and responses. That's the only thing we have control over. We can't control the environment. We can't control the climate. We can't control people.
Politicians.
People have free will. As long as people have free will, you can never control anyone. Only person you have control of is yourself, how you conduct yourself. That's it. Everything else is out of your control, and you have to accept that.
And as soon as you expect something from somebody else, you will absolutely be disappointed 99 out of 100 times. And that's a fact. And something else I see a lot now is social media has changed the dynamic and landscape of expectations. So let's talk about why do we create expectations? And I know you had some great stories, Steph, that you wanted to tell about how we were as parents and expectations we had on our kids in order to do those. So here's some reasons why we create expectations. Societal norms, right? You're expected to show up to work on time.
Well, I was going to say, even the way that society has made us look at our role as a husband and wife. Now we show up in a marriage and we expect certain things out of our husband and wife because of what society has showed us.
Not what works in your family.
Yeah. So not only we're learning it from society, we're learning it from how we grew up, we're learning it from other people we've seen. So there's all these factors coming into play that aren't even just our own expectations. This is all outside expectations.
Think like mothers staying at home and supporting the household. That is,
look how much that changed.
It's so much more important than a man going out to work. But then as society changed, mothers were expected to support the household and hold down the house, but they were also expected to go out and have a career at the same time.
Yeah.
Not because that's what, women wanted to do. Some women did and some women didn't. But societal norms has forced it in a certain direction instead of saying, just do what's best for you and makes you happy. And Steph, you dealt with your own, self-worth around being a mother and thinking that did you have a voice? Poor, little old me.
Well,
what
I always felt so I made a choice to stay home. And I feel blessed that in today's society, women have a choice. You can decide to work or you can decide to stay home. And I'm not going to judge anybody for doing either.
Or the man can.
Right. Yes, exactly. So I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, it's created a feeling of I kept feeling this pressure from society. Now I can't say I have a title of a job that I do outside of being a mother, and I feel judged for that. And but the women who work feel judged. People judge them for not staying home with their kids or putting their kids first. So no matter what, we feel like we can't win. We're feeling pressure and an expectation from society either way. So this is where I'm talking about the expectations are a lot of what's making us feel unhappy. And this happens in our homes too with our children. Parents tend to put expectations on their children that are unrealistic.
Right. And I know you want to tell, because I think you connect a story that you talked about earlier. Let's go through the rest of these. Why do we create them? And then I want you to connect the story about how as parents, we put expectations based upon our lived experiences and expect our children to live out their experiences the same way we do, even though we do it based upon love because we want the best for them. What that does for kids when we're putting expectations on them. So I think, the second thing is, why do we create these expectations? It's personal experiences. All of our personal experience make us react. They make us respond. They dictate the way we love. They make us put expectations internally and externally. And by the way, even with those, there's implicit expectations. Those are implied. You're just supposed to do things because there's societal norms, what we're supposed to do. And there's explicit, which is you're actually telling somebody what you want, right? So I won't say the joke because it's inappropriate, but Steph and I were joking about implicit and explicit expectations earlier. I'm sure you've heard me joke before about a couple things. So you can probably imagine where that joke went. And then the third thing is the need to have control and create predictability. And I know for me, this was a big one. I grew up in chaos. Expectations for me were what I thought, the ability for me to control an outcome. I hold myself to a very high standard. I would also hold everybody around me to not the same high standard, but pretty close. Yeah. And so I'm pushing people in a way that they're not ready to be pushed based upon their current capacity on their experiences, because I've lived my own. And so it's not okay to, force your expectations on somebody else based upon your need to control the outcome. And I have grown a lot over the years for this on the need to control because of the chaos, and just allow the only thing that I really focus on controlling is my own personal attitude.
And that's why I pointed out a little while ago when I said write that down, that you can't expect someone else to respond the way you would respond. That's unrealistic. Because of our own experiences, we're all going to react differently to things, and we have to recognize that. So I think that's a big piece of the need to have control.
And I want you to think about this. When was the last time you had expectations for someone or for yourself? Think about both. How did you feel when they weren't met? And how often are they not met? Which is, I'm sure, is going to be the majority for everybody. It will always throw you in inner turmoil and chaos and give you this angst where you just can't quite get happy because you just have these unrealistic expectations about life.
I'm going to say, even just a small example of, like, say I give a gift to a friend, and like for their birthday, and I'm expecting them to have a certain reaction because I'm like, I gave them the gift. This should make them really happy. And they don't have the reaction that I was expecting. Now we both are going to feel bad because, really I'm going to feel bad because I was expecting a certain outcome and that didn't happen, but I don't know what that person has experienced. Maybe something I gave them triggered something negative for them.
Or maybe their love language, go back to episode 4, or go back to episode 4 where we talked about the 5 love language. That's not their love language. Really, all they wanted was a hug and for you to say something nice to them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Maybe that wasn't, whatever I gave them wasn't their love language. So they didn't receive it the same way I thought they would. And so then I'm just let down and feeling bad about doing something that was good. So what, there's no joy in that. There's no happiness. So, and this is where we're trying to get to the heart of, like, why the expectations can be such a pitfall for, your happiness. It really affects your happiness.
And, Steph, talk about the example you gave around parenthood today, and how as parents, we put our own personal expectations on our kids and what that really does to them over the long term. And parents, this is tough, right? Because Stephanie and I have done it to our own kids too.
Right.
We're not perfect. It's just building the awareness and then acting with intentionality after you listen to these episodes to elevate your life ceiling and your life floor and continue to grow as a human being. So don't beat yourself up if you've done it, because so have we, but just make the adjustment. So go ahead.
I think that as parents, we want the best for our kids. And most of the time this comes from a place of good intention, but sometimes our execution is not the same. So I was telling Walt earlier, because we always talk about some things that we want to talk about in the episode. And, I've seen parents where they expect their kid to like what they like or want to do what they want to do. Like, for instance, a father who loves sports, and he's expecting I'm just going to say sons, it could be daughters too, but he's expecting his son to have the same love of sports and the same ability of sports that he had. And so he kind of pushes the son into whatever it is, playing baseball. And the son doesn't have the same love or the same ability for it, and he doesn't enjoy it. And so what does that do to the son? Then he just feels like he's letting you down.
Yeah.
He's disappointing you. He's not living up to your expectation. He's feeling like that's failing.
And it's not like the son isn't trying or he doesn't want to in this moment, right? Because every kid wants their parents' love.
And then what if that son, though, had a real gift for music or art or something else that the father wouldn't have even thought to put him in because it's just not a love of his? Then that child's missing out on that gift that they had. And they could have been just crushing it in life.
Yeah.
Living out their purpose in this
Maximizing their
gift,
potential.
but they never got to because the parent never wanted to let him explore what he might like. He didn't give him the opportunity and didn't support it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this is really impactful that's a huge example of.
Well, you were talking about earlier and what that child will grow up feeling like.
Yeah, and then they're always going to feel like they never measured up. You know, they're never going to make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
They're never going to be enough. And that carries with someone their whole life.
Right. And then as an adult, they have low self-confidence.
And this might have been you. This might have been you as a child. Maybe your parent had that expectation on you. Maybe you're passing that on to your child. Like, this is the kind of stuff we have to start recognizing that we're doing. And this is why we try to, make you guys realize, like, the focus for yourself. We can only control what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But even pointing that out to your parent, maybe your parent needs to hear that from you. And maybe you need to temper your expectations on your own children.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just an example of how it affects us in our parent-child relationship.
Yeah, and I saw it with a pair of mine in corporate America, especially. I have my own I could probably go on for 4 days talking about the impact of my childhood on me as an adult, but I saw it from somebody who came from a very loving home, and she got a Division I scholarship to play a sport, and her parents still said, I wonder why you didn't get a D1 scholarship to a bigger school, though. Is there something you think we could have did to get you in a bigger school? Maybe if you only would have tried a little harder, you could have got into a bigger school. Meanwhile,
so they're placing their expectation on.
Right. Meanwhile, this young woman, she's glowing because she got a Division I scholarship. Holy crap. What an accomplishment. Right.
Right.
But the parents, because they just want the best for their kid, and it's coming from love. And that's what's so crazy about this. They want the best from their kid. And so when we were working together, she always felt like she couldn't do enough. She always felt bad because she's working, and then she trying to get home to her kids and getting home at bath time sometimes, because we were grinding at work. And she always struggled to just be enough with who she was, and was always chasing the next thing, or was always chasing the next level, or just had self-doubt whether or not she was being a great mother or a great coworker or a great teammate or a great person. That's what putting those expectations on your kids really does. I mean, because look, here's the reality. The one expectations I've always had from my kids, you're going to put your best effort in, right? And the thing is, you still need left and right parameters in life.
Right, and this is another one we see. We see a lot of parents expect their children to get straight A's. What if your child doesn't have the aptitude? What if they really just aren't understanding the material? Maybe they're not really an academic kind of person. Yeah. Maybe they're really gifted, though, in the arts, and they excel in that, but they may not really get great grades. And that's okay if that's not their path.
As long as they put the effort in. My rule was, because you still got to have rules in society, right? You still got to have a benchmark, a framework for success, parameters to operate under. But when you constrict the parameters based upon your expectation, you set people up for failure, and you set your life up to be unhappy. The reality is, you can have the parameters, but you need to give them a wide berth to operate in. And even for our own daughter, I'll never forget, she got straight A's all through high school. It was like her thing. She wanted to do it. She set these very lofty expectations
She's
on herself. Super overachiever, right? So one semester, I think it was her junior year in math, she gets an 89.6, and the teacher doesn't round up. And she comes home and she's pissed, y'all. I'm telling you, she hadn't got a damn B since I don't even know, since grade school. She just worked her butt off, right? And she took it really serious and all these things. And she's so mad. And she's like, Dad, the teacher gave me a B. He knows he's supposed to round up. And I said, well, what's an A? And so in my head, because I personally wrote a lot in my life, I said, this is a great teaching moment. What's an A, baby? And she goes, 90%. I said, what'd you get? She goes, 89.6%. I said, so what'd you get? She goes, well, technically a B plus, not an A. And I was like, okay. And I was like, did you do all your homework? Yes. Did you study for your tests? Yes. Is there anything else you really could have done? I mean, I don't think so. Not really. And I said, in life, you're going to have to realize that sometimes your best is only going to be a B. And you got to be okay with that. When you expect perfection from yourself, and God, I lived with this for so long, man. And I have to still fight the urge to do this to myself. When you live with perfection, you will live a life of disappointment and pain, and you will never be happy. So if you're out there and you're like, holy crap, they're talking to me, and you're living a life of perfection, I feel you, because I lived that way for so long. Nothing was good enough. It was always the next thing. I reached a goal. I took one breath and I said, how do I get to the next goal? I never stopped to smell the roses, be present and where I was at, really just enjoy the journey and embrace the fact that I made it that far, and then continue down the path in whatever direction I was headed without expectations, but instead just with my benchmark for success and these parameters of personal integrity and character that I wanted to operate under.
Right. So now we've given you an example of how this affects your home life, your work life, your
relationships with friends.
Yes, even friends. Because I have to tell you guys, that's where my struggle has been a lot with expectations is, I think my expectations with friends, because sometimes, you feel like they should be a certain way and they should
call you, they should text you, they should do all these things that you're not even doing yourself sometimes, right?
And that's the thing with expectations. And what I'm really trying to drive home here is that, we can't expect something from someone else that we're not willing to do ourselves. So we really have to look at ourselves and say, well, am I even doing that? Because it's one of those things where it's like, if you want to receive love, you need to give love. If you want to receive respect, you need to give respect. You have to give these things to receive them. So we can't have an expectation of someone that we're not willing to do ourselves. And if you look at most of your expectations, a lot of times you are expecting things that you don't even do.
Steph, look, okay, now I'm going to tell something kind of funny that I really had to overcome in this journey of entrepreneurship. And Stephanie has too. So, you put out posts, you're trying to enhance people's lives and make things better. The algorithm sucks in all social media, and it will beat you down if nobody likes or comments on your post, because it just sees as nobody liking your post or your podcast or your video or whatever it is you're doing. But because we have expectations from our friends that
even down to social media, we're expecting, we should get some likes on this.
Well,
sometimes I get really upset because I'm like, I shared this really nice family picture and it got 2 likes, and I see someone taking a bathroom selfie and it's got 200, and I'm like, what is wrong with America? What is wrong with our society today? People care more about this person taking a selfie in the bathroom than someone putting this really nice picture of their family.
But it's selfish though, right, Steph? It's selfish because in that moment you're upset, and I don't mean you personally, me too, right? You're upset that you didn't get love and somebody else did. You didn't get the like and somebody else did. So you're not getting the dopamine hit. You expected to get it. You don't get it. And now you're pissed and you're frustrated and you're hurting the relationships. But what if that person didn't see it?
Yeah.
What if the algorithm didn't show it to them?
This is something we're finding out now.
Y'all, tell it, this is real life right now.
We're like, well, now that it shows you how many views, at least for business stuff, it'll show you how many views it got. And you're like, well, geez, okay, if only 20 people saw it, no wonder it didn't get any likes.
Out of 1,600 people, 46 people saw it and 20 people liked it. Well, shit, that's pretty good. Out of the 46 people who saw it, 20 liked it. But I'm thinking out of the 1,600, only 20, so it's so, you end up just living a life where you're so petty, and then you're upset for no reason. And here's what kills entrepreneurs. Here's what kills their entire business. They're so focused on the expectation of what they want other people to do instead of focusing on service to others, that when they don't get that love in return for that beautiful post that they just put out, that was super meaningful, that had great stuff in it, and they continue to not get that in the beginning or in the middle or whenever, they just stop. And meanwhile, their story could have changed the world and their story could have saved people's lives, and they stop.
Yeah.
Because of their expectations.
I love that you said that about entrepreneurship, because I was going to say also with entrepreneurship, a lot of times that's the problem. You go into it with these expectations of like lofty dreams and goals and what you're going to achieve. And when you don't, when it doesn't happen right away, because you had this expectation, you give up and you stop chasing it. And then you live with this regret. And then you live with like unhappiness of like that you didn't pursue it anymore and what it could have been. So there's another way that the expectation of what you thought it would be doesn't turn out that way. It ends up, it really takes a lot more work, and you don't realize, like, so maybe you put 2 years into it and you didn't know that at year 3 or year 5, you were going to reach that goal you were shooting for, but you didn't find out because you didn't keep going and keep pursuing it.
You've done all this work. You've been chipping away in the tunnel. The diamonds are on the other side. There's a meme that they show. You got 2 miners, one on the top, one on the bottom. They're both chipping towards a giant diamond mine. And the one person gives up right before they're there. And I can't tell you, you don't know when your breakthrough is going to happen. If you're healing from trauma, if you're trying to work on your marriage, if you're improving and growing yourself in this, judgment-free, but growth, non-growth-free zone that you're in right here. If you're limiting expectations and you think that the first time you do it, there's going to be this transformation because that's what you expect, or that's what you've seen somebody else do, but really you don't know how much work they put in.
Right.
You don't know their life experience.
It's that iceberg mentality.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're only seeing the success, but we didn't see the 10 years of hard work they had put in before they reached that success. Oftentimes that's what happens, and that's what social media is doing to us, is we're seeing these successful people and we're comparing ourselves to them, and we don't get to see the journey it took them to get there.
Well, it's funny. Christopher Rausch, we had on last week, one thing he said, I heard him say it so many times. He goes, yep, I'm a 20-year overnight success. And so stop focusing on other people. Start focusing on yourself. Extract those expectations of where you think you should or shouldn't be. Just keep, the only thing you control is that next step, the response versus a reaction to the trigger, your emotions, healing from things so you could fill your capacity and your bucket of love that you have inside to move throughout the world different. Like that's, and that should be your benchmark for your life.
And that just made me think of something else too. Another expectation that we have sometimes.
Snap. Step about to go off.
With our parents, because it's a great example. Like when you've been through trauma, sometimes you have this expectation of what your parent should have been or should be.
Yeah.
And you're expecting them to show up a certain way. And when they don't, you feel let down, you feel disappointed, but you're holding them to an expectation, not realizing that they don't have the capacity to be the person you want them to be. Maybe they didn't heal their trauma and they can't show up as the person that you need. And you have to accept that.
And love them where they're at. Again, it doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean that you bypass red flags. It doesn't mean that you don't protect your peace. It just means to protect your peace, you got to love them where they're at and just be in gratitude for the way they can show up instead of being pissed about the way that they can't because they don't meet your expectation. It's huge. Okay, so I think this is a great time, Steph, to get into the 4 keys. So how can we, like Steph says, so a little different, right? How do you limit, like you said, babe, how do you limit your expectations, or how do you remove them altogether to really become happier and fulfilled? What are the 4 things? And there's a lot of things. What are the 4 things that we personally think you can do to transform your reality of where you're at versus the expectations of where you think that you should be? So what do you think, Steph?
So number 1, we say acknowledge the impact of your expectations. meaning recognize how the expectations limit your potential and they cause you heartache and angst and hurt, which is kind of what I just talked about with the parent. So I jumped the gun a little bit. But when I said, like, when you're holding your parent to this certain expectation and they don't show up as the mom or dad that you expected to have, or you see society has, you have to recognize that your parent may have things that you don't know happen to them. They had experiences you don't even know about that shaped who they are. And so that created it to where they can't show up in that way. They don't have the capacity to be who you need them to be. And so and also, like we talked about a little bit earlier with your children too, the expectation you have on them. Your child is different from you. They've had different experiences. They're a different person. Their personality could be different. Like, all these different factors go into the fact that they might not be able to reach that expectation you have. Same thing.
Or your relationships, babe. Let's say your husband went out and barbecued some steak, and you like steak because I like steak.
Yeah.
Ribeye steak, in case anybody ever wants to send us any. So you like steak, and you're inside and you're thinking, I'm going to eat this delicious steak that's about to come in here. Man, I love when they put that Montreal seasoning on. It's so good. I just can't wait. But you didn't realize that your husband had a really rough day at work and he was looking forward to a steak and he couldn't find the Montreal seasoning, because we all know men be looking for stuff and can't find it right in front of their face. Don't judge me.
This is true.
Don't you judge me. I'll be asked, Steph, where's that thing at? She's like, it's literally in front of your face. So, and the steak comes in. And this is a petty, small example, but this is really what happens in life. And the Montreal seasoning isn't on it. And you're just thinking, instead of being in gratitude for your spouse who just cooked you that meal, now all you're focused on, because you expected it to be a certain way. So not the fact that they went out there, they started it, they seasoned it with what they had, they grilled it to perfection at a medium. Y'all better not be no medium well or well done people on here. You got to go. No, they grilled it to a perfect medium. It's juicy. It's a great cut. And you got all these beautiful things happening around you. And you're just pissed that there's not Montreal seasoning on it. Right? Funny example, but that's what we do in so many aspects of our lives. And it's so petty. How do you feel in the moment if you're the person pissed about Montreal seasoning? You're just mad. You're mad because 4 out of your 5 expectations were met and you're focused on the one that isn't met. And now you're pissed about the one instead of being in gratitude and thankful for the 4. And you're frustrated at your spouse. So now you're a little edgy and they're walking on eggshells around you. And now next thing you know, you're getting a divorce because they didn't put Montreal seasoning on the steak. And I'm being funny, but I'm no joke, guys. Like, Stephanie and I live this. This is the pettiness of what you feel in relationships sometimes that builds over time, of what expectations will do for you because you're in turmoil, and what it does to your relationships over time. It will erode those and crush the potential in every aspect of your life. I just can't say that enough.
Right. I see it all the time in relationships where, especially when you have young children, that, let's say I cook dinner and then I'm expecting, because I cooked dinner, my husband would do the dishes, or my husband would, or my kids would do the dishes, or, or it was bath time and I was hoping he would do it tonight. And then he doesn't do it the way that I would do it. And then I'm mad because, I'm getting on him about how he didn't do it the way I would have done it. It really doesn't matter as long as the child gets bathed.
That's right.
But sometimes we're that petty about this stuff, and then we hold resentment over it.
That trickle of resentment turns into a fire hose. So what are you supposed to do? So the first thing is acknowledge the impact of the expectations. Sit down, and I want you to really sit down and write this out. What were the last 3 or 4 times that you were frustrated and disappointed with something, yourself or somebody else? And then I want you to write down what you expected from them. And I want you to see just how unreasonable you actually are with yourself and how unreasonable you are with other people, because that expectations are unreasonable in my opinion. So let's say you wanted your spouse to bathe the kids at night. So number 2, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to communicate your desires and hopes to your spouse. How are they supposed to know? Like, I don't got ESP. Women, ladies, men will do what you ask them to do. I mean, maybe not literally that second, maybe in 6 months, but men will do it at some point.
So
you just have to communicate.
What we have to realize is we may have these hopes, right? We have these hopes that they're going to do something. But if we see that they're not doing it and it's starting to bother you, then you need to communicate that specifically, and I'm saying specifically to them. You know, and he talked a bit about how there's implied and explicit. Mm-hmm. And in relationships, especially in the spouse or significant other relationships, we really have a lot of implied and thinking that the other person knows and they don't. And we really need to be more explicit with it. Like, you know, Walt always jokes about this because for men, this is a big deal. But a lot of times I think they think, oh, if I do this certain thing for my wife, that's going to make her really happy. And then she's going to turn around and return that in the bedroom.
Oh, we're talking about grown adult stuff up in here right now. Okay, Steph.
And that there's but what I hate is, and then this kind of, where we have these implicit expectations, it turns into a transactional relationship.
Ooh, that's good.
And that is not a good place to be. You don't want to be transactional. It should not be, I do this, you do that. That's not how it works. And that's where I don't like expectations, because when we do something nice and we serve someone and we are doing something as a gift to them, or we're doing it out of the kindness of our heart,
without the expectation.
Yes, there should be no expectation, no strings attached to that, no expectations with that. You should just be doing it because you love the other person and you know they needed it, or you're doing it because you love them and you just want to be nice. You cannot do that expecting something in return. That is not going to work.
So I'll give another quick example on implicit versus explicit. So when I was in corporate America, I got to an organization, and it was just, there was a lot of work to be done to get the culture and the team first environment really intact, so that we could, and we ended up having record breaking results in this, in both companies actually. But so I get to this one organization and people just aren't even really, they're showing up like 5 minutes late. Well, one of these was a call center environment. So those phones turn on, they turn on, right? So all the butts that are in the seats already have to bear the burden for the person who can't show up on time. I loathe it. That's one boundary. That's one left and right limit that I will set every time, so that people understand how to operate within a framework of success, right? That's not even an expectation. That's just the framework for success. Show up. And so I pull this employee aside and I say, hey, like you're 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 4 minutes. I need you to be here on time. When the phones turn on, that's when clients start calling. And if we're not here to answer those calls, the clients get frustrated. And then one of your peers end up dealing with the frustrated client. Like, if we're going to have a team first environment, you've got to be here to bear some of that burden and spread the wealth on the effort. They go, well, nobody's ever told me we couldn't be 5 minutes late. And I thought to myself, first, y'all know I'm a 20.
Well, that's kind of implied.
Not implied. Like, I think it should be implied. Show up to work on time, right? And I'm a 20-year military guy. On time is 15 minutes early. So show up to work on time. That's implied to me, but to them it wasn't. I expected it was already implied. The reality was it wasn't. So then I explicitly helped them understand that showing up to work on time was a non-negotiable and something well within their control to do, so that the time that they had a flat tire, it was out of their control. It wasn't that big of a deal, right? So again, baseline parameter, like left and right limits. And every once in a while, somebody might go outside of that limit. But if you don't set those parameters for people, even in your relationships or at work or for yourself, you're just never going to really have that success, because there's no benchmark. And I think that this leads us to the third one, is practicing compassion for yourself and others. I mean, look, guys, like we're going to go outside. We're going to have expectations. We're going to fall short of expectations. Other people are going to fall short of expectations. It's human nature. Even if we say we don't have them, we still ended up having them. But we have a choice of how we respond to ourselves and respond to others, realizing that we shouldn't really have these expectations. And so you got to have some compassion and empathy for yourself and for others, because we're all human beings at the end of the day and we're not perfect.
Exactly. You touched on it a little bit when you said like you can't expect perfection because there is no such thing as perfect. So that means you're always going to be disappointed and always be unhappy. I mean, that's just holding yourself to unrealistic goals. Like you can't expect to be perfect. And you brought this up not on the show, but before the show with our daughter, where she was playing softball.
Oh, you want me to tell her?
Yeah.
Okay, so she's playing softball, crushing it. She very rarely doesn't get a hit or a walk. And she's team captain, so she puts all this pressure on herself to just excel. She gets up to bat, and she strikes out. And I'm sitting in the stands, and I look over.
She's expecting to never strike out.
And she's sitting on the end of the bench, and she's crying. And I'm thinking to myself, and I didn't realize at this moment, until this moment, she really did have this expectation that she shouldn't strike out. And if she struck out, she was letting the team down because the team expected her to get a hit every single time because that's normally what she did. But nobody expected her to do that. Hello, it's softball. You strike out. That's what you do. If you're hitting 333 in baseball or softball, you're a giant. You're a titan. You're getting that $100 million contract. I mean, I don't even know. Baseball, they get paid crazy now. But anyway. Yeah. And so I walk over to because she's sitting on the end and she's team captain and her team's still at bat. And I walk over and I said, hey, why are you crying? And I'm subtle. And she goes, because I struck out. And I said, so why are you crying? And she goes, I'm not supposed to strike out. I'm letting the team down. Again, learning opportunity as a parent.
She had an unrealistic expectation of herself.
And I probably was a little harder in this moment than I should have. You dads understand. And I said, no, what you're doing by being over here pouting and crying about striking out, something that's part of the game that you will do again and again and again, is letting your team down. Because what you're showing your team in this moment is that they can't strike out either. What you do is lift your head up, shake it off, go back and get a hit at your next at bat or strike out again, who knows, and show your team it's okay. The most important thing you can do is really support your team in this moment as the team captain. And she looked at me and she wiped her tears away. And I was really proud of her. She walked over there, started cheering for her teammate at bat. It was super cool to see as a dad. And guess what? She never got upset about striking out again because she removed the expectation of striking out. So you've got to have that empathy and compassion. And then Steph, talk about this last one. You know, this one's magic, guys, in any aspect of your life, but especially when it comes to shifting your mindset about expectations and where you need to keep your focus at. So Steph, tell them about this last one.
So the fourth key is practice gratitude. Focus on the present moment and the positive aspects of your life and appreciate the blessings that you have. If you're in gratitude, you can't be unhappy. We talked about this in previous episode. I mean, it's impossible. You can't be in gratitude and be ungrateful at the same time. I mean, that doesn't work. So as long as you're recognizing be happy with the things you are doing. Be happy with the things you are accomplishing. Recognize those things. Be in gratitude for it. And if you're in gratitude for those things, then you're not going to be upset by these expectations. I mean, it's like you can't stress this enough. The gratitude is huge. Everything. If we just practice more gratitude in our life, we would be a lot happier in general.
And you always have something to have gratitude for, to be thankful for. And look, that doesn't mean like what Steph said. I love what you said. It's just have gratitude for the moment that you're in. That doesn't mean you won't have goals, hopes, dreams, desires. You're not striving for things. You're not working on the next level. You're not focused on your personal growth. You should be doing all of those things. But I want you to take away the expectation. I want you to shoot for the goal that you've got in front of you. And I want you to focus on the gratitude of that journey and the struggles that you have along the way, where you're going to elevate who you are as a human being and elevate your life floor because you're embracing the fear and pushing through it. And because you're staying in gratitude for the little teeny tiny things. I've been getting all these for the last year since I published my memoir, February 22nd of 22. I've been getting all these posts like a year ago today on Facebook. And man, you know how good that feels? But do you know how I would have just shrugged that to the side before?
And there's days where you're like, man, you just feel like you're not moving the needle forward. You feel like it's like I'm not accomplishing anything.
Because I have expectations, not gratitude in that moment.
Right. And then when you look back and you get those memories and you're like, wow, I did that. Like I wrote that book. I got that book published. Like
I'm getting paid to go speak. They're paying me to run my mouth. I can't believe it.
I'm on all these podcasts. I'm getting paid to fly to speak somewhere. Like huge things that you should be so grateful for. But we lose that when we start focusing on our expectations.
And an attitude of gratitude will absolutely make you think that you get to do what you're doing in your life. And when you get to do something, it just perpetuates more gratitude and you're thankful. And that has a direct correlation to your level of happiness.
By the way, I think this is why we have struggles in life, is because it does make the struggle makes us appreciate when the good things happen to us, we can appreciate it on a whole nother level because we know what it's like when we don't have it, or we know what it's like to struggle.
But have you ever grown, Steph, when it's easy?
Nope.
Growth doesn't happen when it's easy.
No.
Growth happens when it's challenging, when it's tough, when you're pushing the boundaries of who you are. And so if you don't take nothing else away from this entire episode, I want you to take away the need to practice gratitude in every single facet of your life. Tell yourself, thank you, job well done. Tell yourself you're proud of yourself. Tell yourself that you're amazing. Tell yourself that, this is only the beginning. Thank the people around you for the way that they're showing up in the best possible way that they can. Watch your relationships flourish when you don't worry about the Montreal seasoning on your steak and we start worrying about it being juicy, ribeye, medium, well done. Look, we're having steak tonight. I'm not even joking. But
it's got steak in the brain.
And practice that gratitude for what you do have. And when you do that, you will truly start to live limitless. And what you bring into your life, people talk about manifestation a lot. Manifestation to me is just seeing where you want to be. But if you don't have gratitude, you're never really going to get where you're meant to go. So it's really, to me, about having gratitude in the moment for where you're at, seeing where you want to go, enjoying the journey, and then everything will come to you so much faster than the denial you're going to get if you sit in expectations, and the frustration you're going to get if you sit in expectations. So practice that gratitude.
Yeah, I hope you guys see that the expectations lead to disappointment. It directly affects your happiness. Gratitude. Well, anytime you live in gratitude, you will feel happy. You're feeling grateful for what you have. It creates happiness. So they're kind of like polar opposites.
And ultimately, you have a choice. Either do it or don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then live with the results. Right? Because this is about growth. And so, go ahead, Steph.
I was going to say, the next time you're feeling unhappy, really ask yourself, well, am I having an expectation of something that's unrealistic? Am I being grateful for this moment right now that I'm in? Am I grateful? Because we can be grateful every day in every moment for something, something good in every moment, if we're willing to look at it that way. So this is another example of, we have to ask ourselves these questions. We have to look at ourselves. It requires really turning the mirror on ourselves and saying, what am I doing in this moment? Am I grateful right now for what I have? And you have to be real with yourself in those moments too. Don't deny that you're doing those things. Really be honest with yourself.
And I love what you just said. the mirror. Stop looking out the window and start looking in the mirror and watch your life absolutely transform. So look, guys, join us next week. We have our next amazing guest, a warrior sister to both of us, my Canadian friend, Tara Murney, on the podcast. Tara is truly a dear friend that I met on this journey over the course of the last year and a half. She is absolutely,
Tara, love her.
she's absolutely the epitome of what Legacy Warrior stands for, and her story of triumph.
Yes, she has an incredible story, y'all. I mean, really incredible.
Yeah.
And a true warrior, if she can overcome the things she's overcome and turn around and serve others, then we all can.
That's right. She continues to make just big waves, and we'll see if she's able to talk about some of the stuff that she has coming up, and some of the things that were just laid upon her doorstep that's going to help her transform so many lives. And so I can't wait for her to share how she went from tragedy to triumph and how now she's helping others do the same. So look, if this episode resonated with you, share it. Or you know what? You can even text it. Hit the 3 little dots on Apple Podcasts and text it. We're on every single platform for podcasts. Share it with someone who could benefit from this message.
Yeah, I just want to share because honestly, I know that when I went on the podcast, it wasn't really intuitive how to subscribe to the podcast. So I'm just going to tell you guys, at least on Apple Podcasts, this much I know. You have to go to where those 3 dots are. And it doesn't necessarily say subscribe. I think it says follow. So and it's the top one, I believe. If you hit follow, then you'll be subscribed to the podcast, and then you'll be it will notify you when we have new episodes.
On Apple, it'll put a little check mark next to it, and then you're following it. It'll let you know.
I also found out that it wasn't easy to leave I didn't find it easy to leave a review. That if you're on a phone, if you're on a mobile device, you have to scroll to the bottom to see the reviews, and that's where you can leave a review. So just in case, I know that this wasn't necessarily easy to find. So
yeah, it's not in your face, right? So, but don't forget to subscribe, like Stephanie was talking about, to the Legacy Warrior podcast on whatever your preferred platform is, and follow us on YouTube at Legacy Warrior Podcast. You could see us looking at each other, looking at you on the screen, looking at each other, looking at you, cutting up. You can't see my hand slapping her leg underneath the thing, or squeezing her knee to make her jump a little bit. And then follow us on Instagram at Legacy Warrior Podcast. Both the links are actually in the podcast notes. We absolutely value your feedback. I really love that last week's episode on boundaries. We were able to do that because somebody asked us to, and then the feedback we got from that individual was tremendous. And so we're here to serve, guys. This makes our heart sing to be able to bring a guest on, or for us to be able to share some stories if we have the capacity to talk about it in a way that's helpful. So let us know what you want to hear, your thoughts about the podcast, suggestions for future episodes. And until the next time, stay in the arena of life, keep fighting, taking steps forward, and
leave this world a little bit better than you found it.
See you guys next Tuesday.